she and her 6-year-old son pulled over to save a stranger from an accident. To her greatest shock, he's the billionaire CEO who left her to die in labor. "Why should I help you?" Nairi's voice trembled with 6 years of suppressed rage as rain pounded the roof of her old Subaru. "You left me bleeding on a hospital floor. You abandoned our son before he even took his first breath." The man lay trapped in his overturned luxury car, blood streaming down his face, his expensive suit torn and muddied. Recognition dawned in his eyes, followed by disbelief. "Nairi, is that really you?" Kieran Blackwood whispered, his voice barely audible over the storm. "Mom?" called a small voice from behind her. "Is the man going to be okay?" Nairi closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the moment crushing her chest. She could walk away right now. After what he'd done to her, she should just leave him here on this desolate mountain road. Let fate decide if he deserved to survive. But that wasn't who she was. That wasn't who she'd raised her son to be. "I'm going to help you," she said coldly. "Not because you deserve it, but because my son is watching." Have you ever faced a moment where your deepest values collided with your most justified resentments? What would you do if the person who shattered your life suddenly needed you to save theirs? Would you choose mercy or justice, compassion or retribution? Join me, Mr. Wentworth, as we explore this extraordinary tale of a woman forced to make an impossible choice when fate brings her face to face with the man who abandoned her during her darkest hour. If you believe in the power of redemption, or question whether some betrayals are beyond forgiveness, this story will challenge everything you thought you knew about the human heart's capacity for healing. The storm had descended upon the mountain with unexpected fury, transforming the winding road into a treacherous ribbon of slick asphalt and limited visibility. Nairi Winters gripped the steering wheel tightly, her knuckles white with tension as she navigated the hairpin turns with practiced caution. 6 years living in these mountains had taught her respect for their unpredictable weather, especially in late autumn when conditions could deteriorate within minutes. "Mom, look at the lightning." 6-year-old Finley pressed his face against the passenger window, his breath fogging the glass as another brilliant flash illuminated the darkening sky. His small hands clutched a worn dinosaur plushie, a constant companion since he was a toddler. "I see it, buddy." Nairi forced a smile despite her concern about the deteriorating conditions. "We're still about 20 minutes from home. Why don't you tell me more about what you learned in science class today?" Finley launched into an enthusiastic explanation about the water cycle, his animated gestures making the dinosaur dance through imaginary clouds. Nairi divided her attention between her son's excited chatter and the treacherous road ahead, grateful for the distraction from her anxiety. They had just rounded a particularly sharp curve when Nairi spotted it. The gleaming metal barrier along the roadside was mangled, with fresh tire marks cutting through the mud beyond it. Without hesitation, she slowed the car and pulled carefully onto the shoulder. "What's wrong, Mom?" Finley asked, peering through the rain-streaked windshield. "I think someone might have had an accident." Nairi put on her hazard lights and reached for the emergency kit she always kept under her seat, a habit from her former life as an emergency medical technician. "Stay in the car, okay? I need to check if anyone needs help." "But Mom..." "Just for a minute, Finn. Lock the doors behind me." Her tone left no room for argument. The rain was merciless as Nairi stepped out, instantly soaking through her jacket. She pulled the hood tight around her face and moved carefully toward the damaged guardrail, peering over the edge. About 15 feet down the steep embankment lay a sleek black luxury car, overturned on its roof, one wheel still spinning slowly. Without hesitation, Nairi began carefully making her way down the muddy slope, her boots sliding on the slick ground. As a wilderness guide, she'd navigated far worse terrain, but the combination of rain and gathering darkness made every step treacherous. "Hello? Can anyone hear me?" she called as she approached the vehicle. A faint groan answered her, sending a surge of adrenaline through her system. Someone was alive in there. She crouched by the driver's side window, which had shattered on impact. Through the broken glass, she could see a man still secured by his seatbelt, hanging upside down, blood trickling from a gash on his forehead. "I'm here to help," she said clearly, slipping into the professional tone she'd used countless times during emergency calls. "Can you tell me your name?" The man's eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first, then struggling to find her face in the dimness. My leg. Trapped." Try not to move. I'm going to see if I can get you out. Nairi assessed the situation quickly. The car hadn't caught fire, which was fortunate, but the crushed front end and leaking fluids suggested it remained a dangerous situation. The driver's door was crumpled beyond opening, but the rear door on the same side looked more accessible. She was about to try it when she heard the sound of small feet sliding down the embankment behind her. "Finley, I told you to stay in the car." Panic flashed through her as she turned to see her son carefully making his way down, wearing the two large raincoats she kept in the back seat. "You might need help," he stated matter-of-factly, his expression serious beyond his years. "I brought the big flashlight." Despite her frustration at his disobedience, Nairi couldn't deny that the powerful beam would be useful. "Fine, but you stay back, understand? At least 10 steps away from the car." Finley nodded solemnly, turning the flashlight toward the wreckage. The improved visibility allowed Nairi to better assess the situation, and that's when she saw the driver's face clearly for the first time. Her blood-turned eyes, the strong jawline, now scratched and bruised, the distinctive arch of eyebrows she'd once traced with her fingertips. The eyes, those piercing blue eyes that had once looked at her with such intensity before they turned cold with dismissal. Kieran Blackwood, CEO of Blackwood Technologies. The man whose ambition had meant more to him than their unborn child. The man who had walked out of her hospital room 6 years ago when complications arose during labor, leaving her to face death alone while he secured a business merger. The man who had never once looked for his son. For one terrible moment, Nairi couldn't move. Every painful memory, every sleepless night, every tearful explanation to Finley about why he didn't have a father like other kids, it all crashed over her with paralyzing force. She could leave him here, wait for another driver to come along, claim she'd just arrived herself, or simply call emergency services from a safe distance up the road where cell reception might return. After what he did to me, I should just walk away, she thought, the bitterness she'd carried for 6 years rising like bile in her throat. But that wasn't who she was. That wasn't who she'd raised Finley to be. "Mom?" Finley's voice broke through her moral crisis. "Is the man going to be okay?" Nairi took a steadying breath. "I'm going to do everything I can to help him, Finn." She turned back to the car, pushing aside her personal feelings to focus on the immediate problem. Kieran was drifting in and out of consciousness, clearly unaware of who she was. The irony wasn't lost on her. The man who had abandoned her in her moment of greatest need now depended entirely on her for survival. "Sir, I need you to stay awake if you can," she said, her voice deliberately neutral as she worked to open the rear door. It gave way with a metallic groan. "I'm going to try to reach the seatbelt mechanism." "My leg," he mumbled, his words slurring slightly, a concerning sign of potential head trauma. "I know. I'll get to that. First, we need to secure your neck and get you out of this position." Nairi was now fully in emergency mode, her training overriding her emotions. "Finley, shine the light inside the car, please. Stay where you are." Her son obeyed, holding the beam steady as Nairi maneuvered through the back door and into the cramped space of the overturned vehicle. The metallic smell of blood mixed with leather and expensive cologne, a scent she tried so hard to forget. "Can you tell me your name?" she asked, knowing full well who he was but needing to assess his cognitive function. "Kieran," he mumbled. "Kieran Blackwood." "Do you know what day it is, Kieran?" He hesitated, confusion evident in his expression. "Thursday. I was heading to the resort. Board meeting. You've been in an accident. Your car went off the road." Nairi carefully reached around him to locate the seatbelt release. "I'm going to undo your seatbelt, but I need you to brace yourself with your arms if you can. Your weight will shift suddenly." Kieran attempted to position his arms as instructed, but his movements were uncoordinated. Nairi noticed his right arm seemed to be functioning better than his left, suggesting a possible shoulder injury. "On 3. 1, 2, 3. She pressed the release, immediately supporting his upper body, as he slumped downward with a pained groan. "I've got you. Try to keep your neck straight." With considerable effort, she managed to ease him into a less precarious position, quickly assessing his injuries. The head wound was bleeding steadily but didn't appear life-threatening. His left shoulder was clearly dislocated. The real concern was his right leg, pinned by the crushed dashboard. "Mom," The rain's getting worse. Finley called, his voice barely audible over the strengthening downpour. She glanced back to see her son shivering despite the raincoat, the wind having picked up considerably. This situation was becoming more dangerous by the minute. We need to get him out now, she decided. Finn, run back up to our car and grab the emergency blanket from the first aid kit. The silver one. As Finley carefully climbed back up the embankment, Nairi turned her attention to freeing Kieran's trapped leg. The dashboard had collapsed inward, creating a vise-like grip around his thigh. She could see no obvious deformities suggesting a fracture, but the compression alone could cause serious damage if not addressed quickly. Kieran, can you feel your leg? Can you wiggle your toes? His eyes focused on her momentarily. Yes, hurts, but can feel it. Good. That's good. She searched the car interior, looking for anything she could use as a lever. The glove compartment had sprung open in the crash, spilling papers and a small toolkit onto what was now the roof of the car. This might help. Using a combination of the tire iron from the kit and her own body weight, Nairi managed to create just enough space for Kieran to pull his leg free. He gasped in pain but remained conscious, which she took as a positive sign. Finley returned with the emergency blanket just as she was ready to extract Kieran from the vehicle. Good job, buddy. Now, I need you to go back up and open the back door of our car. Make it ready so we can get him in quickly. Is he coming home with us? Finley asked, eyes wide. Just until we can get help. Nairi explained, not wanting to complicate the situation further. The storm's too bad to wait for emergency services, and we don't have cell reception here. Finley nodded and began his third climb up the slope, moving with remarkable sure-footedness for a 6-year-old. Turning back to Kieran, Nairi found him staring at her, with a flicker of recognition. Do I know you? He asked, his voice clearer than before. Let's focus on getting you out of here, she deflected. This is going to hurt, but we need to move quickly. The car isn't stable. With methodical care, Nairi guided Kieran out through the rear door, supporting his weight as best she could as they emerged into the full force of the storm. She wrapped the emergency blanket around him, tucking it securely to preserve body heat and provide some protection from the relentless rain. Can you stand? She asked, assessing whether his injured leg could bear weight. Kieran attempted to put pressure on his right leg but immediately buckled. No, can't. Okay, I'm going to help you up the slope. It won't be elegant, but we need to get you to my car. She positioned herself under his right arm, taking as much of his weight as she could. Small steps. Use your good leg and I'll support you. The journey up the embankment was grueling. The rain had turned the ground to slick mud, and every step threatened to send them sliding back down. Kieran was a tall man, significantly heavier than Nairi despite her own physical strength, and his semi-conscious state made him more of a deadweight than a participant in their ascent. By the time they reached the road, Nairi was gasping with exertion, her muscles burning with the effort. Finley stood by their open car door, his small face a mask of concern. You did great, Finn. Now help me get him into the back seat. With a final surge of determination, Nairi maneuvered Kieran into her modest SUV, arranging him as comfortably as possible across the back seat. She quickly assessed his condition again. His breathing was steady, pulse strong but rapid, pupils equal and reactive when she checked with the small pinlight from her kit. The bleeding from his head wound had slowed, but the dislocated shoulder and injured leg needed proper medical attention. Finley, buckle up. We need to get moving. She closed the back door and hurried to the driver's seat, dripping water everywhere. Where are we going, Mom? The hospital is really far, Finley observed as he secured his seatbelt. Nairi glanced at the storm raging around them, considering their limited options. The nearest hospital was indeed almost 2 hours away in good conditions, and these were far from good. The mountain roads would only become more dangerous as the storm intensified. We'll head home, she decided. It's closest, and I have enough supplies there to stabilize him until we can get proper help. As she carefully pulled back onto the road, Nairi caught Finley looking curiously at their unconscious passenger. Mom, you knew his name before he told you, he said with the innocently perceptive observation that often caught her off guard. Do you know that man? Nairi's hands tightened on the steering wheel. I did. A long time ago. Before I was born. She swallowed hard. Yes, buddy. Before you were born. Finley seemed to accept this explanation for the moment, turning his attention back to the window where rain lashed against the glass with increasing ferocity. In the rearview mirror, Nairi could see Kieran's face, slack in unconsciousness. The cut on his forehead had left a trail of dried blood down his cheek, and even in the dim light, she could see the lines of stress and age that hadn't been there 6 years ago. She wondered if he would recognize her when he fully regained consciousness, if he would remember what he'd done, if he would even care. The drive to her cabin took longer than usual as Nairi navigated the treacherous conditions with extreme caution. By the time they pulled up to the modest but sturdy log structure, the storm had escalated to near blizzard conditions, with sleet mixing with the rain and visibility reduced to mere feet. "Finley, run inside and turn on all the lights. Get the fire going stronger, too." Nairi handed him the house keys. "Remember how we practiced, Nairi?" The boy nodded solemnly and dashed through the downpour to the front door, fumbling slightly with the keys before disappearing inside. Moments later, warm light spilled from the windows, creating a golden contrast to the gray tempest around them. Nairi turned her attention to Kieran, who had regained semi-consciousness during the drive. "We're here. I need to get you inside, Nairi." His eyes opened, clearer than before but still clouded with pain. "Where?" "Somewhere safe," she answered simply. "Can you help me get you inside? It's just a few steps." With considerable effort and Kieran's minimal assistance, Nairi managed to extract him from the car and half-carry, half-drag him to the cabin door. By the time they crossed the threshold, they were both shivering violently from the cold and exertion. The cabin's interior was blessedly warm, the wood stove in the corner radiating heat throughout the open-plan living area. Finley had indeed stoked the fire and turned on every lamp, creating an almost excessively bright space that would help Nairi better assess Kieran's injuries. On the couch, she directed, guiding Kieran to the worn but comfortable sofa that faced the wood stove. "Finley, bring me the big first aid kit from the bathroom, please." As Kieran sank onto the couch with a pained groan, his eyes began to take in his surroundings, the rustic wooden walls adorned with nature photographs, the small kitchen area with copper pots hanging above a modest stove, the handmade wooden toys scattered on a colorful rug. "Nice place," he managed, his voice strained. "It's home." Nairi began removing his sodden jacket, her touch clinical and impersonal. "I need to check your injuries properly." Finley returned with the comprehensive medical kit, far more extensive than a typical household first aid supply, and placed it beside his mother. "Do you need anything else?" "Bring some clean towels and the scissors from the kitchen drawer." Nairi opened the kit, pulling out gauze, antiseptic, and a blood pressure cuff. "Then put on dry clothes, buddy. You're soaking wet." As Finley scampered off to follow her instructions, Nairi turned her professional attention to Kieran's injuries. The head wound needed cleaning and possibly stitches, the dislocated shoulder required reduction, and his leg needed thorough examination to rule out fractures or compartment syndrome. "This may hurt," she warned as she began cutting away his sodden dress shirt. "Already hurts," he replied with a grimace that might have been an attempt at a smile. "You seem to know what you're doing." "I was an EMT. Before." "Before what?" Nairi didn't answer, focusing instead on cleaning the laceration on his forehead. Up close, his face was more familiar than she wanted it to be, the same features that she sometimes saw reflected in Finley's expressions. The resemblance was subtle but undeniable, particularly around the eyes and the shape of his brow. "This needs stitches, but butterfly closures will have to do for now." She worked efficiently, her fingers steady despite the turmoil inside her. "Your shoulder is dislocated. I'll need to reduce it." "You can do that?" He seemed more lucid now, watching her with increasing awareness. "Yes, it'll hurt, but it needs to be done." Finley returned in dry clothes, carrying towels and the requested scissors. "Mom, I put water on to boil like you taught me for emergencies." "Good thinking." She smiled at her son, struck again by his composure in crisis situations. "Can you bring our guest a blanket from the linen closet? A dry one?" While Finley was occupied with this task, Nairi leaned closer to Kieran. "I'm going to reduce your shoulder now. Try to relax your muscles." Without waiting for a response, she performed the maneuver with practiced precision, rotating his arm and applying steady pressure until the joint slipped back into place with an audible pop. Kieran let out a sharp cry, then exhaled shakily as the immediate pain gave way to relief. "Better?" she asked, already reaching for supplies to fashion a sling. "Yes," he breathed. "Thank you." Finley returned with a thick wool blanket, watching the proceedings with undisguised curiosity. "Is his arm broken?" "No, just dislocated. I fixed it, but he'll need to keep it still." Nairi arranged the sling around Kieran's arm and neck. "Now I need to check his leg." The examination of Kieran's leg revealed significant bruising and swelling, but no obvious fractures. Nairi applied cold compresses and elevated the limb on cushions, then performed a thorough neurological assessment to rule out serious head trauma. "You're very lucky," she concluded. "No signs of severe concussion, no apparent fractures. But you need proper medical attention when the storm passes." "Why do you have all this medical stuff?" Finley asked, gesturing to the extensive kit his mother was now repacking. "Your mother appears to be very prepared," Kieran replied, studying Nairi with growing interest. "Mom knows everything about helping hurt people. She used to be a med. An EMT, Nairi supplied. That was a long time ago. Finn. Before we moved to the mountains, the boy added helpfully. Now she takes people hiking and teaches them about nature instead." "A wilderness guide?" Kieran asked, his gaze never leaving Nairi's face. A flicker of something, recognition, perhaps, crossed his features. "Have we met before? You seem familiar." "You seem?" The moment Nairi had been dreading had arrived. She straightened up, finally meeting his eyes directly. "Yes, Kieran, we've met." Confusion clouded his expression as he studied her face more intently. Then, like a slow dawning sunrise, recognition transformed his features. His complexion, already pale from shock and pain, blanched further. "Nairi?" he whispered, disbelief evident in his voice. "Nairi Winters?" "It's been a while," she replied, her tone deliberately neutral. 6 years, he said softly, his eyes moving from her face to Finley, who stood nearby watching their exchange with obvious curiosity. The boy's age, the timing. The implications visibly crashed over Kieran in waves of realization. "Is he?" "Finley," Nairi interrupted firmly, "can you go to your room and find some dry socks? Your feet must be freezing." "But Mom." "Now, please." Recognizing his mother's no-arguments tone, Finley reluctantly trudged toward the small hallway, leading to the bedrooms, glancing back at them several times before disappearing around the corner. Once he was out of earshot, Nairi turned back to Kieran, her expression hardening. "Yes, he's your son. The son you never bothered to look for." "I didn't know." Kieran's voice cracked, his eyes still fixed on the hallway where Finley had vanished. "They told me you lost the baby. That you'd taken the settlement and wanted no contact." "What settlement?" Nairi nearly spat the words. "I never received anything from you except a clear message that your business merger was more important than us." "No, that's not what happened." Kieran attempted to sit up straighter, wincing at the movement. "Nairi, you have to believe me. When complications started, I was pulled into an emergency conference call. By the time I got back to the hospital, they told me you'd left after losing the baby." "Who told you that?" "My COO, Harlow, and the family attorney. They said you'd signed paperwork, accepted a generous settlement for your trauma and distress." His expression was a mixture of pain and dawning horror. "They showed me the documents with your signature." "I never signed anything," Nairi said flatly. "I nearly died on that delivery table, Kieran. Alone. And when I woke up, I had a premature son and no father in sight. Just a clear message from hospital administration that my bills had been paid anonymously and I should consider myself lucky." The color drained from Kieran's face. "That's impossible. I was told." "I don't care what you were told." Nairi cut him off. "You walked out when things got complicated. You made your choice. I tried to find you afterward." He insisted. "When I started having doubts about what I'd been told. But you'd disappeared completely. No forwarding address, no social media presence, nothing. Nah. I moved here to start over. Away from the memories. Away from you, and everything you represented." She began gathering the first aid supplies with sharp, angry movements. "I changed my number because your assistant kept calling to arrange the delivery of the settlement paperwork I'd supposedly already signed." Kieran closed his eyes, his expression pain beyond his physical injuries. They lied to me. All of them. That doesn't absolve you of walking out in the first place, Nairi countered, though a seed of doubt had been planted. You still chose to leave when I needed you most. Before Kieran could respond, Finley reappeared, now wearing thick wool socks and carrying a small stack of books. Mom, can I read to the man? You always say stories help people feel better when they're hurt. The innocent request diffused some of the tension in the room. Nairi took a deep breath, reminding herself that her son's well-being came before her own anger. That's thoughtful of you, Finn. But Mr. Blackwood needs rest. Actually, Kieran said softly, I'd like that very much, if it's okay with your mother. Nairi hesitated, then nodded once. One story. Then he needs to rest, and you need dinner. Finley beamed, approaching the couch with careful consideration for Kieran's injuries. These are my favorite books. You can choose. I of you. As Finley presented his selection of well-worn children's books, Kieran handled them with reverence, as if they were precious artifacts. These are excellent choices. I think this one looks perfect. He selected a book about a lost bear, finding his way home through a forest. That's one of my favorites too, Finley exclaimed, settling onto the floor near the couch. I can read most of it myself now, but I still get stuck on some words. Kai. I'm sure you read beautifully, Kieran said, his voice thick with emotion. Nairi retreated to the kitchen area, keeping them in her peripheral vision as she began preparing a simple dinner. The domesticity of the scene was jarring. Finley reading aloud to the father he didn't know, Kieran listening with undisguised wonder, occasionally helping with a difficult word or asking a thoughtful question about the illustrations. It was everything she'd once imagined in those early, hopeful days of her pregnancy, everything that had been stolen from them both. The storm continued to rage outside, rattling the windows and howling through the trees surrounding the small cabin. They were effectively trapped together for at least the night, possibly longer if the weather reports proved accurate. Nairi wasn't sure if that was a blessing or a curse, time for truth to emerge, or time for old wounds to reopen and bleed afresh. As she mechanically chopped vegetables for soup, her mind traveled back to the day everything had fallen apart 6 years ago. The contractions had started unexpectedly, 2 months before her due date. Kieran had been distracted, preoccupied with the massive corporate merger that would solidify Blackwood Technologies as an industry leader. Still, he'd driven her to the hospital, held her hand through the initial examination, promised to stay by her side. Then his phone had rung. An emergency with the merger negotiations. He'd sworn it would only take 30 minutes, just a quick conference call to resolve a last-minute issue. This deal will secure our future, he'd said. Our child's future. I'll be right back. But he hadn't come back. And when complications arose, her blood pressure plummeting, the baby in distress, Nairi had faced the terror alone. Emergency cesarean. Hemorrhaging. The medical team fighting to save both mother and child. Finley had been born tiny but fighting, with his father's determined chin and his mother's stubborn will to survive. When Nairi had finally regained consciousness, weak from blood loss and surgical trauma, her first question had been about her baby. Her second had been about Kieran. The nurse's pitying look had told her everything she needed to know. Your bills have been taken care of, the hospital administrator had informed her days later. The father wished to remain anonymous. There will be no further contact. The betrayal had nearly broken her. But Finley had needed her to be whole, so she pieced herself back together and built a new life far from the corporate world where Kieran Blackwood was making headlines with his revolutionary tech merger. A small voice pulled her from the painful memories. Mom, I finished the story. Can Mr. Blackwood have some water? He says his throat is dry. Nairi blinked back the moisture that had gathered in her eyes. Of course. Why don't you set the table, while I help him? She filled a glass and brought it to Kieran, who accepted it with a grateful nod. His eyes were red-rimmed, whether from pain or emotion, she couldn't tell. Thank you, he said quietly. For everything. For helping me. For raising him so well. I didn't do it for you, she replied, her voice low enough that Finley couldn't hear from where he was carefully arranging spoons on the small dining table. I know, but I'm still grateful. He took a careful sip of water. Nairi, we need to talk about what happened. About the lies we were both told. Nairi. Not now. Not in front of him. Of course. Kieran glanced toward Finley, his expression softening. He's amazing, smart, kind. You've done an incredible job. He's the best thing that ever happened to me, Nairi said simply. The only good thing that came from us. The hurt that flashed across Kieran's face was almost satisfying, but Nairi felt no real pleasure in it. 6 years of single parenthood had taught her that bitterness was a luxury she couldn't afford. Not if she wanted to raise a compassionate son. Dinner will be ready soon, she said, turning back toward the kitchen. I'll bring you a bowl here. You shouldn't try to move to the table. Actually, Kieran said hesitantly, I'd like to try to sit at the table with you both, if that's okay. Nairi wanted to refuse, to maintain the distance between them, to protect the fragile family unit she built with just herself and Finley. But her son was already responding enthusiastically. Yes, you can sit in the special chair with the cushions, Mr. Blackwood. It's the most comfortable one. Faced with Finley's innocent excitement, Nairi found herself nodding reluctantly. If you think you can manage it, but let me help you. Why? With careful maneuvering and support from Nairi, Kieran made it to the table. Settling into the chair, Finley had indicated with obvious pride. The domestic scene was surreal. The three of them gathered around the small wooden table as if they were a normal family, sharing a normal meal, while outside, the storm continued its furious assault on the mountainside. This is delicious, Kieran commented after tasting the vegetable soup. You always were an amazing cook. Mom makes the best soup. Finley agreed enthusiastically. She says soup is like medicine, but tastier. Your mother is very wise, Kieran said, his gaze lingering on Nairi. Mr. Blackwood, do you like dinosaurs? Finley asked suddenly, changing subjects with the rapid-fire attention shift typical of 6-year-olds. I do, actually. I wanted to be a paleontologist when I was about your age. Really? What's a paleontologist? Olen. A scientist who studies dinosaur fossils, Kieran explained, his expression brightening at Finley's interest. I had a whole collection of books about them. I have books too. And models. Do you want to see them after dinner? I'd love that. Nairi watched their interaction with a complicated mixture of emotions. There was anger still, yes, at the years lost, at the lies apparently told, at the fundamental betrayal of trust. But there was also an undeniable sadness for what might have been, and perhaps the faintest flicker of something else. Something dangerously close to hope. Mom, can Mr. Blackwood stay in the guest room tonight? The storm is really bad. The question brought Nairi back to practical realities. Yes, he'll have to stay until the road's clear. But he needs to rest and recover. Finn. No bothering him with too many dinosaur facts. I wouldn't mind, Kieran said softly. The dinosaur facts. Their eyes met across the table, and for a fleeting moment, Nairi saw the man she'd once loved, thoughtful, gentle, genuinely interested in others beneath the ambitious exterior. The man she believed would be an amazing father. The moment passed as quickly as it had come, reality reasserting itself with the next crash of thunder outside. After dinner, I'll make up the guest bed, she said, breaking eye contact. And check your injuries again. 1. Thank you. The words carried weight beyond simple gratitude. For everything. The meal continued with Finley dominating the conversation. Pepper in Gigi Kieran with questions about his favorite dinosaur, his favorite color, whether he liked snow, which Finley declared was far superior to rain, and if he knew how to play chess. Finley was learning but still confused about how the night moved. Kieran answered each question with patient attention, never talking down to the boy, engaging with him as if his opinions were valuable and interesting. It was exactly how Nairi had always imagined a good father would interact with his child. After dinner, true to his word, Finley retrieved his prized collection of dinosaur models to show Kieran, carefully explaining each one's name and key characteristics. This is a triceratops. It has 3 horns and a frill to protect its neck. And this one is a stegosaurus. The plates on its back might have been for temperature control, not just protection. That's what my book says. That's the current scientific theory. Kieran agreed, handling each model with appropriate reverence. The plates could help it warm up or cool down, depending on how they were positioned toward the sundae. Exactly. Finley beamed at being taken seriously. Mom got me a book that has all the newest dinosaur science. Some of the old books at school are wrong now. Science is always changing as we learn more, Kieran said. That's what makes it exciting. Nairi observed from the kitchen as she cleaned up dinner, noting how naturally they interacted, how similar their expressions became when discussing something that interested them both. The genetic connection was undeniable, not just in physical appearance but in mannerisms, in the way they both gestured with their hands when explaining something complex. Eventually, Finley's excitement gave way to yawns, and Nairi stepped in. Time for bed, buddy. It's been a very long day. But Mom, I'm showing Mr. Blackwood my collection. And you can continue tomorrow if the storm keeps us all here, she replied firmly. But now it's time for your bath and then bed. Finley reluctantly gathered his dinosaurs, then turned to Kieran. Will you still be here in the morning? Something flickered in Kieran's eyes, longing, perhaps, or regret. Yes, I'll be here. The roads won't be clear until at least tomorrow afternoon, maybe longer. Good. Then I can show you my books about space too. I like space almost as much as dinosaurs. I look forward to it. Kieran's smile was genuine, if tinged with sadness. Thank you for sharing your dinosaurs with me, Finley. You have an excellent collection. Once Finley had been ushered off for his nighttime routine, an awkward silence fell between the adults. Kieran shifted uncomfortably in his chair, wincing slightly as he jarred his injured leg. Let me help you to the guest room, Nairi offered, her professional demeanor returning. You need to elevate that leg properly and get some rest. Nairi, he began, his voice low and intense. We need to talk. About what happened. About Finley. I know, she acknowledged, fatigue evident in her voice. But not tonight. You're injured, I'm exhausted, and it's been a lot to process. He doesn't know who I am, does he? No. He thinks his father didn't want us, which is what I believed happened. She met his gaze directly. I never lied to him. I just didn't tell him the parts I couldn't bear to explain. What have you told him about me? That you were ambitious and focused on your career. That you weren't ready to be a father. She shrugged slightly. It was easier than telling him you abandoned us in the hospital. Kieran flinched at her words. I didn't know, Nairi. I swear to you, I didn't know he survived. I was told you'd lost the baby. And you believed that without seeing me? Without demanding proof? Without any attempt to check on the woman who was supposedly carrying your dead child? The bitterness she tried to suppress leaked into her voice. He faltered, shame evident in his expression. There's no excuse. I should have insisted on seeing you. Should have questioned what I was told. The merger was reaching a critical phase, and I let myself be guided by people I trusted. People who apparently lied to both of us. Nairi acknowledged reluctantly. But that doesn't change the fact that when complications started, when things got difficult, your first instinct was to step away for a business call. It's the biggest regret of my life, he said quietly. Even before knowing about Finley, even believing what I was told, walking away from you that day has haunted me for 6 years. The raw honesty in his voice gave Nairi pause. This wasn't the calculating businessman she'd built up in her mind over years of resentment. This was a man confronting profound mistakes and missed opportunities. Let's get you settled in the guest room, she said finally. We both need to rest. Tomorrow will be complicated enough. With careful support, she helped Kieran to the small but comfortable guest room adjacent to the main living area. The room was simply furnished with a double bed, a dresser, and a small desk beneath the window where rain continued to lash against the glass. There are extra blankets in the closet if you get cold, she explained, helping him sit on the edge of the bed. The bathroom is just across the hall. I'll check your injuries once more before I turn in. As she examined the gash on his forehead, replacing the butterfly closures with fresh ones, Kieran remained silent, his eyes never leaving her face. The proximity was unsettling. This close, she could detect the same subtle scent that had once been so familiar, could see the faint lines around his eyes that hadn't been there 6 years ago. Your pupils are equal and reactive, she noted professionally. But wake me if you experience increased headache, nausea, or confusion during the night. Concussions can be unpredictable. I will. He caught her wrist gently as she finished her examination. Nairi, thank you. Not just for the medical care, but for helping me at all. After what you believed I'd done, you would have been justified in driving past. The touch of his fingers against her skin sent an unwelcome jolt of familiarity through her. She carefully extracted her wrist from his grasp. "That's not who I am," she said simply. "I couldn't leave anyone in a wrecked car during a storm, regardless of our history. Still, thank you." His voice was rough with emotion. "And thank you for raising our son so well. He's incredible, Nairi. You've done an amazing job with him." The words "our son" hung in the air between them, acknowledging a connection that could never truly be severed, regardless of the years and lies that had separated them. "Get some rest," she said finally. "Tomorrow we'll figure things out." As she turned to leave, Kieran spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. "I never stopped looking for you, even believing what they told me. I just wanted to make sure you were okay." Nairi paused in the doorway, not turning back. "Well, now you know. We're okay. We've been okay without you for 6 years." She closed the door gently behind her, leaning against it for a moment, as emotions threatened to overwhelm her. 6 years of carefully constructed independence and protective anger were being challenged by revelations she hadn't expected and feelings she'd thought long buried. After checking on Finley, who was already fast asleep with his favorite dinosaur plushie clutched to his chest, Nairi retreated to her own room. Through the window, she could see the storm showing no signs of abating, the wind driving rain and sleet against the glass in relentless waves. Trapped. They were all trapped together in this small cabin, until the weather cleared, a mother, a son, and the father who had been a ghost in their lives until today. If you're captivated by this story of unexpected reunion and the possibility of healing after betrayal, please like this video and subscribe to Lux Love Chronicles with Mr. Wentworth. In the next part, we'll discover whether Nairi can find it in her heart to forgive the man who shattered her trust, whether Kieran can prove he's worthy of a second chance, and how young Finley will react to learning the truth about his father's identity. Some wounds run too deep for easy healing, but sometimes the most difficult storms bring unexpected clarity. Morning arrived with unexpected brightness, the storm having exhausted itself overnight. Sunlight streamed through the cabin windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in golden beams that belied the emotional tempest still brewing within its walls. Nairi had barely slept, her mind replaying fragments of conversation with Kieran, questioning everything she believed for 6 years. Had she really been lied to? Had he truly not known about Finley? The possibility that they had both been victims of manipulation, rather than just her, was almost more painful to consider than the narrative she constructed to survive. She slipped quietly from her bedroom, hoping to have a few moments alone before Finley woke with his characteristic early morning energy. To her surprise, she found Kieran already awake, seated awkwardly at the small kitchen table with a mug of coffee steaming before him. "I hope it's okay that I made coffee," he said, his voice low to avoid waking Finley. "I couldn't sleep much." "It's fine." Nairi moved to pour herself a cup, maintaining a careful distance. "How's the pain?" "Manageable." He shifted slightly, wincing. "Your medical skills are impressive." "Necessity," she replied simply, taking a seat across from him. "Living this remotely, you need to handle emergencies yourself." "One." Kieran nodded, his eyes taking in the cozy cabin kitchen, the handmade curtains, the children's artwork magnetized to the refrigerator, the well-worn cookbook open to a pancake recipe on the counter. "You've built a good life here," he observed quietly. "We have." Nairi's emphasis on the plural was subtle but deliberate. "It's peaceful, safe, away from people like me. Away from the life I thought I wanted before I understood what really mattered." She sipped her coffee, studying him over the rim of her mug. In the clear morning light, his injuries looked worse. The bruising around his temple had darkened to a mottled purple, and fatigue lined his face. But his eyes were clear, alert, watching her with an intensity that was unsettling. "We need to talk about what happened," he said finally. "About the lies we were told." "Yes." Nairi set down her mug with careful precision. "But not until I understand why you were on this mountain road in the first place. It's not exactly on the way to anywhere a man like you would be going." Kieran's expression shifted, something complicated passing across his features. "I was heading to Silver Pine Lodge." "The luxury resort? That's still 30 miles further up the mountain." "Yes, I have a corporate retreat there every autumn. Board members, key investors, strategic planning for the coming year." He paused, his fingers tracing the rim of his mug. "And this year, I was planning to announce my resignation as CEO." Nairi couldn't hide her surprise. "You're stepping down? Why?" "Blackwood Technologies is more successful than ever from what little I've seen in the news." "Success isn't everything." His gaze met hers directly. "I've spent 6 years building a company I thought would be my legacy, only to realize that without someone to share it with, it means nothing." "Nah." The simple admission hung in the air between them, weighted with implications Nairi wasn't ready to consider. Before she could respond, a pattering of small feet announced Finley's awakening. He bounded into the kitchen in dinosaur pajamas, his dark hair tousled from sleep. "Mom, it stopped raining," he exclaimed, then noticed Kieran at the table. "Oh, you're still here, Mr. Blackwood." "Good morning, Finley," Kieran replied with a warm smile that transformed his tired face. "I certainly am. Does your head still hurt?" "Mom is really good at fixing hurts." "She is indeed. I'm feeling much better, thank you." Nairi stood, grateful for the interruption. "How about pancakes for breakfast, Finn? You can help measure the ingredients." The domestic scene that followed was surreal. Finley standing on a step stool carefully measuring flour, while Nairi heated the griddle. Kieran watching from the table with undisguised fascination at this glimpse into their daily life. It was achingly normal and profoundly strange, simultaneously, a vision of what might have been playing out 6 years too late. "Mr. Blackwood, do you like blueberries in your pancakes?" Finley asked seriously. "Mom says they make them healthier but also yummier." "Blueberries sound perfect," Kieran replied. "Your mom always did make the best pancakes." Finley paused in his stirring, looking between the adults with sudden curiosity. "You ate Mom's pancakes before?" The innocent question hung awkwardly in the air. Nairi shot Kieran a warning glance. "A long time ago," Kieran answered carefully. "Before you were born." "Were you and Mom friends?" Kieran hesitated, looking to Nairi for guidance. She gave a small, reluctant nod. "Yes, we were friends," he said, the oversimplification evident in his tone. "Good friends, actually." "But not anymore?" Finley's perceptiveness was sometimes startling. "It's complicated, buddy," Nairi interjected, rescuing them both. "Sometimes grown-ups lose touch with each other. But right now, let's focus on these pancakes before the batter gets lumpy." Finley accepted this deflection, returning his attention to the mixing bowl. Breakfast proceeded with lighter conversation, Finley dominating the discussion with elaborate plans for building a snow fort once winter properly arrived. "Last year mine wasn't very good because I was too little," he explained to Kieran between bites of syrupy pancake. "But now I'm 6 and I can make it much better. Mom helps with the big snow blocks, but I do the designing." "That sounds impressive," Kieran said. "I built snow forts when I was about your age, too. My father taught me to pack the snow just right so the walls wouldn't collapse." "Did you do lots of things with your dad?" Finley asked innocently. A shadow crossed Kieran's face. "Not as many as I would have liked. He was very busy with work most of the time." "Like my dad?" The question was directed at Nairi, who froze with her coffee cup halfway to her lips. "You said he was too busy with work to be with us." The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken truths. Kieran's eyes found Nairi's, a silent communication passing between them, pain, regret, uncertainty. "Speaking of work," Nairi said finally, "I need to check if the roads are clear. I have a guided hike scheduled tomorrow that I might need to reschedule." "Sick." She escaped to the front porch, breathing in the crisp mountain air, still fresh from the storm. The world outside was transformed, branches heavy with lingering raindrops that sparkled in the morning sun, the distant peaks dusted with early snow where higher elevations had seen colder temperatures. The door opened behind her, and she knew without turning that it was Kieran, not Finley. His presence had always carried a certain energy she could sense even before he spoke. "I'm sorry about that," he said quietly, joining her at the porch railing. "I didn't mean to create an awkward situation." "It's not your fault. He's at an age where he's asking more questions about everything, including his father." Nairi kept her gaze fixed on the mountains. "I've tried to be honest without giving details that would hurt him." "What have you told him?" "That his father was someone I cared about who wasn't ready for a family. That sometimes adults make choices that hurt other people without meaning to." She glanced at Kieran briefly. "I never vilified you." I didn't want him growing up with hatred in his heart. Thank you for that. Kieran's voice was rough with emotion. He's an incredible child, Nairi. You've done an amazing job raising him. Nairi, I had no choice but to be strong for him. The words held no accusation, just simple truth. Being a single parent doesn't leave room for weakness. I should have been there, Kieran said quietly. Should have questioned what I was told. Should have searched harder for you. 1. Yes, you should have. Nairi finally turned to face him fully. But what matters now is what happens next. Finley is perceptive. He's already connecting dots we didn't intend to connect. We need to decide what we're going to tell him, and when. Kieran nodded, his expression solemn. I want to be part of his life, Nairi, if you'll allow it. I've missed 6 years I can never get back, but I don't want to miss any more. It's not that simple. You can't just walk in and declare yourself his father after 6 years of absence, regardless of whether that absence was based on lies. He needs stability, consistency. He needs to know the people in his life won't disappear when things get difficult. I understand that, and I'm prepared to prove myself, to earn a place in his life however you think is appropriate. Kieran met her gaze steadily. I'm not asking to disrupt the life you've built. I'm asking for a chance to add to it, on whatever terms you set. Before Nairi could respond, Finley appeared in the doorway. Mom, the pancakes are getting cold, and I want to show Mr. Blackwood my rock collection after breakfast. We're coming, buddy, she assured him, grateful for the interruption. To Kieran, she added quietly, we'll continue this conversation later. The morning unfolded with an odd domesticity as Finley proudly displayed his various collections, rocks, pine cones, interesting feathers he'd found on hikes with his mother. Kieran showed genuine interest in each item, asking thoughtful questions that delighted the boy. Watching them together, Nairi felt a complicated mixture of emotions, joy at seeing Finley so animated, pain at the years of similar interactions they'd lost, fear of what changes might come to their carefully constructed life. By midday, the roads were beginning to clear, though the local news station reported numerous downed trees and power outages throughout the region. Nairi's cell phone finally showed reception bars, immediately buzzing with delayed notifications. Your people must be looking for you, she said to Kieran, who was seated on the floor with Finley, examining a chessboard between them. You should probably call them. Thanks for watching. They can wait a little longer, he replied without looking up. Finley is teaching me his special chess opening. It's not really special, Finley admitted with a giggle. I just made it up. But it works sometimes because people don't expect it. The best strategies often come from unexpected places. Kieran agreed solemnly, moving a pawn in response to Finley's unorthodox opening. Nairi left them to their game, retreating to the kitchen to prepare lunch and check her own messages. Several clients had contacted her about upcoming wilderness tours, and her friend Iris from the local outfitter store had texted to make sure they'd weathered the storm safely. She was responding to these messages when Kieran's phone, which she'd retrieved from his wrecked car and charged overnight, began ringing insistently. The screen displayed Harlow Reed, COO, the very person who had allegedly lied to Kieran about Nairi and the baby 6 years ago. Your phone, she said, returning to the living room and holding it out to Kieran. It's your COO. A dark expression crossed Kieran's face as he recognized the name. I should take this. Excuse me for a moment. He accepted the phone and moved toward the front porch, his movements stiff from his injuries but purposeful. Through the window, Nairi could see his expression transform from neutral to increasingly angry as the conversation progressed, though his voice remained too low for her to hear the words. Is Mr. Blackwood mad? Finley asked, observing the same scene from his position by the chessboard. I think he's having a difficult conversation with someone from his work, Nairi explained, sitting beside her son. Sometimes, adults have disagreements that need to be resolved. Is he going to leave soon? The question held a note of disappointment that caught Nairi off guard. Probably. The roads are clearing, and I'm sure he needs to get back to his important job. But his car is broken, Finley pointed out logically, and he's still hurt. We'll figure something out, Nairi assured him, though the logistics were indeed complicated. Kieran's luxury vehicle was undoubtedly totaled, and the nearest car rental agency was in the town nearly an hour away. The front door opened with more force than necessary as Kieran returned. his expression thunderous despite his attempt to compose himself when he saw Finley watching. "Everything okay?" Nairi asked, though the answer was clearly no. "Just business matters," Kieran replied tightly. "Nothing that can't wait." He made a visible effort to soften his expression as he rejoined Finley at the chessboard. "Now, where were we? I believe you were about to capture my knight with a very clever move." Finley beamed at the recognition of his strategy and returned to the game, but Nairi could see the tension radiating from Kieran's shoulders, the tight set of his jaw that indicated barely controlled anger. Later, while Finley was occupied with a book in his room, Nairi confronted Kieran in the kitchen where he was attempting to help wash the lunch dishes despite his injured shoulder. "What happened on that call?" she asked directly. "You looked ready to throw your phone into the forest." Kieran's hands stilled in the soapy water. "Harlow, the man who told me you'd lost the baby and taken a settlement. He was concerned about my whereabouts, wanted to know if I still planned to make the announcement about stepping down. And I confronted him about what happened 6 years ago." Kieran's voice was controlled but vibrating with anger. "He denied everything at first, then tried to justify it when I wouldn't back down. Said the company was at a critical juncture, that the merger would have fallen through if I'd been distracted by personal matters." "Personal matters," Nairi repeated flatly. "That's what he called the birth of your child? And nearly losing you in the process." Kieran turned to face her, his expression raw with emotion. "He admitted they paid the hospital to tell me you'd lost the baby and chosen to leave. That they forged documents with your signature agreeing to a settlement and no contact. Why would they go to such lengths? A business merger, no matter how important, doesn't justify that level of deception." "It wasn't just the merger." Kieran leaned against the counter, suddenly looking exhausted. "My family's trust controlled a significant portion of company shares. My father made it clear that if I ruined my future with family distractions before securing the company's position, he would withdraw support entirely." "So your father was involved in this too?" The betrayal seemed to expand with each revelation. "Harlow claims he was acting on my father's direct instructions." Kieran's laugh was bitter, devoid of humor. "Protecting the Blackwood legacy at all costs. Even if it meant denying me knowledge of my own son." Nairi absorbed this information silently, memories shifting and realigning with this new perspective. She'd met Kieran's father only once during their relationship, a cold, calculating man who had regarded her with barely concealed disdain. "Your father never approved of me," she said finally. "I wasn't from the right background, didn't have the right connections. He didn't approve of anyone or anything that might divert me from the path he'd planned." Kieran's expression was haunted. "And I was too blind, too ambitious to see how he was manipulating me, too eager to prove myself worthy of the Blackwood name. And now? You said you're planning to step down as CEO? Why?" "Because I finally realized what his approval has cost me." Kieran's gaze was direct, unflinching. "A life with the woman I loved, 6 years with my son. Everything that actually matters." The simple honesty of his answer struck Nairi more powerfully than she'd expected. Before she could formulate a response, Finley's voice called from the living room. "Mom, Mr. Blackwood, come look. There's a rainbow." The moment broken, they moved to the window where Finley stood pointing excitedly at the brilliant arc stretching across the sky above the distant mountains. "It's a double rainbow," Kieran observed, crouching slightly to Finley's level despite the pain it clearly caused his injured leg. "See the fainter one above?" "Wow." Finley's eyes widened. "I've never seen two before. Is that rare?" "Somewhat rare," Kieran confirmed. "It happens when sunlight reflects twice inside the raindrops, instead of just once." "How do you know that?" Finley asked, impressed. "I used to read a lot about natural phenomena when I was about your age. Weather patterns, geological formations, astronomy." Kieran smiled slightly. "My nanny called me the little professor. Mom calls me her little scientist sometimes." Finley bounced with excitement at this connection, especially when I asked too many questions about how things work. "There's no such thing as too many questions when you're trying to understand the world," Kieran assured him. Nairi watched their interaction with a tightness in her chest. The similarities between them extended beyond physical appearance, the same curiosity, the same methodical approach to understanding complex concepts, the same quiet intensity when focused on something that captured their interest. As the afternoon progressed, The question of Kieran's departure became more pressing. His injuries, while not life-threatening, made driving inadvisable, and his vehicle was beyond repair. "I can call for a car service," he suggested as they discussed options. "There must be something available in the nearest town." "The nearest service that would come this far up the mountain would charge you a small fortune," Nairi pointed out practically. "That's not a concern," Kieran replied dismissively. "I just don't want to impose on you any longer than necessary." "I could drive you into town tomorrow," Nairi offered reluctantly. "I need to go anyway to check on some equipment for an upcoming tour. You could rent a car there." "No," Finley's protest startled both adults. He had been quietly drawing at the coffee table, but was now looking up with an expression of dismay. "Mr. Blackwood can't leave yet. He hasn't seen the waterfall, and I haven't shown him where the Fox family lives, and we haven't finished our chess game." "Finley," Nairi began gently, "Mr. Blackwood has important work to get back to. He can't stay in our cabin indefinitely." "But he's still hurt," Finley argued with the implacable logic of a 6-year-old. "And you always say people shouldn't drive when they're hurt because it's not safe." Nairi looked to Kieran for support, but found him watching Finley with such naked longing that her protest died on her lips. "Perhaps one more day wouldn't hurt," Kieran suggested cautiously. "If it's not too much of an imposition. My announcement at the retreat can wait another 24 hours. And just like that, their time together was extended, the inevitable confrontation with reality postponed by mutual, unspoken agreement. The remainder of the day passed in a strange bubble of domestic tranquility, Finley leading Kieran on a careful tour of the immediate surroundings of the cabin, mindful of his injured leg. Nairi preparing a simple dinner. The three of them playing board games as evening fell. It was disarmingly normal, a glimpse into an alternate reality where they had remained a family. After Finley was finally tucked into bed, following multiple stories and a lengthy bedtime routine that Kieran observed with fascinated attention, the adults found themselves alone in the living room. The tension that had been held at bay during the day descended immediately, filling the space between them with unspoken questions and complicated emotions. "He's remarkable," Kieran said softly, breaking the silence. "So intelligent, so compassionate. You've done an incredible job raising him, Nairi." "He makes it easy," she replied, automatically deflecting the compliment. "He's always been a good kid, even as a baby." "How? I wish I had known." The simple statement held volumes of regret. "I wish I had been there to see his first steps, hear his first words, watch him grow into the amazing little person he island. I wish that too, once." Nairi's admission was quiet but honest. In those early days, when he'd finally fall asleep and I'd be exhausted but too wired to rest myself, I'd imagine you walking through the door, apologizing for being late, taking him from my arms so I could shower or just breathe for a few minutes. "Nairi," Kieran's voice broke on her name. "But then I stopped wishing for rescue," she continued, meeting his gaze directly. "I stopped waiting for someone else to make things easier. I became the person Finley needed, strong enough, capable enough, loving enough to be both parents." "And you succeeded brilliantly," Kieran acknowledged. "But Nairi, he should have had both of us. And he still can, if you allow it." The statement hung between them, a proposal and a plea combined. Nairi rose from her seat, moving to stare out the window at the star-filled sky, buying time to organize her thoughts. "What exactly are you proposing, Kieran? That you suddenly appear in our lives as Finley's long-lost father? That we pretend the last 6 years didn't happen?" "No." He stood as well, keeping a respectful distance. "I'm proposing that we find a way forward that acknowledges the past while building something new. I'm asking for the chance to be a father to my son, on whatever terms you deem appropriate. And if I say no? If I tell you that Finley and I are better off continuing as we have been? Then I would respect your decision," Kieran said quietly. "But I would ask you to consider what's best for Finley. He deserves to know his father, Nairi, and I deserve the chance to know my son. Even if that means disrupting the stable life we've built, even if it confuses him, hurts him to learn his father has existed all this time, without seeking him out. We would need to explain carefully, age appropriately, help him understand that I didn't know about him, that I was lied to as well." Kieran moved closer, his expression earnest. "Children are resilient, Nairi, and Finley is exceptionally intelligent. With our support, he can process this in a healthy way. Why, You sound very confident for someone who's known him less than 48 hours. Nairi observed, though without the bitterness that might have colored such a statement earlier. I've had 6 years of watching other people's children and wondering about the one I thought I'd lost. Kieran replied simply. I've read every book on child development I could find, as if somehow it could fill the void. I may not have experience as a father, but I've thought about it every day since I believed our child had died. The raw honesty in his voice was disarming. Nairi studied him in the dim light, seeing not the ambitious, driven man who had walked out of her hospital room 6 years ago, but someone tempered by regret and loss. Someone who understood the cost of the choices he'd made. We need to take this slowly, she said finally, for Finley's sake. If, and it's still an if, we tell him who you are, it needs to be carefully planned, with clear boundaries and expectations. Hope flickered across Kieran's face. Of course. However, you think is best. I'll need time to consider how to approach this, and you'll need to understand that my priority will always be Finley's emotional well-being. She held his gaze steadily. If at any point I believe your presence is causing him harm or confusion, I'll need you to step back without question. I understand completely, Kieran agreed immediately. Finley comes first, always. The conversation was interrupted by a small voice from the hallway. Mom? They turned to find Finley standing in his dinosaur pajamas, clutching his plush T-Rex and looking uncertain. What's wrong, buddy? Nairi moved toward him immediately. Bad dream? Finley nodded, his eyes darting between his mother and Kieran. There was a storm and everyone got lost. It was just a dream, Nairi assured him, kneeling to his level. The real storm is over, and we're all safe right here. Can I have some water? Finley asked, a common bedtime stalling tactic that Nairi recognized well. Of course. She straightened up. Let's get you a drink and then back to bed. Actually, Kieran interjected cautiously, I used to have bad dreams when I was about Finley's age. My mother taught me a technique that sometimes helped. 1. What technique? Finley asked immediately, his interest piqued. Kieran glanced at Nairi for permission before explaining. It's called rewriting the ending. You think about the scary dream, but you change the ending to something positive or funny. How do you do that? Finley's full attention was now on Kieran. Well, if you dreamed about a storm where everyone got lost, you might reimagine it so that the storm turned all the raindrops into bubbles, or everyone found a magical map that led them back together. Finley considered this seriously. Could the storm turn into dinosaurs that helped everyone find their way home? Absolutely, Kieran confirmed with equal seriousness. The more creative, the better. I want to try that. Finley looked to his mother. Can Mr. Blackwood help me rewrite my dream? Nairi hesitated only briefly. If he's willing, and just for a few minutes. It's still late, and everyone needs rest. I'd be honored, Kieran said softly. She watched as Kieran followed Finley back to his bedroom. Their heads bent together as Finley began elaborating on how the storm clouds in his dream could transform into helpful dinosaurs. Something shifted in her chest, a loosening of the protective grip she'd maintained around her heart for 6 long years. When Kieran emerged from Finley's room 20 minutes later, his expression was one of wonder and subdued joy. He fell asleep mid-sentence, he reported quietly, right as the T-Rex was using its tail to create a path through the storm. He does that, Nairi confirmed with a small smile. His imagination works overtime until exhaustion takes over. Thanks. Thank you, Kieran said suddenly, for allowing me that moment with him. For not keeping him from me out of justified anger. He's the one who asked for you, Nairi pointed out, and despite everything, I've never wanted to deprive him of positive relationships. I just never expected one of those relationships might be with his father. The word father hung between them, acknowledging the biological reality they'd been dancing around. Kieran's eyes glistened briefly in the low light before he blinked rapidly and cleared his throat. We should both get some rest, he suggested. Tomorrow will bring decisions. Yes, Nairi agreed. Good night, Kieran. As she lay in bed later, sleep eluding her despite her exhaustion, Nairi found herself confronting possibilities she'd never allowed herself to consider. What would it mean for Finley to have his father in his life? What would it mean for her to co-parent with the man she'd spent years trying to forget? The answers weren't simple, but as dawn crept over the mountains, Nairi realized she owed it to Finley to at least explore the question with an open mind. Morning brought clear skies and a decision. Over breakfast, while Finley chattered about his improved dream where dinosaur rain clouds had helped everyone find their way home, Nairi studied Kieran across the table. He was listening to Finley with undivided attention, asking thoughtful questions and offering genuine enthusiasm for the boy's creative storytelling. "Finley," she said during a natural pause in the conversation, "I need to talk with Mr. Blackwood about something important after breakfast. Could you work on your dinosaur drawing in your room for a little while?" "Is it grown-up stuff?" Finley asked, wrinkling his nose. "Yes, it is," Nairi confirmed. "But not for too long, I promise." Once Finley had reluctantly retreated to his room, Nairi turned to Kieran with resolution in her expression. "I think we should tell him," she said directly. "Not everything, not all at once, but the basic truth, that you're his father, that there was a misunderstanding that kept you apart, and that you want to be in his life now." Kieran's intake of breath was audible. "Are you sure?" "No," Nairi admitted. "But I'm sure that continuing to dance around it will only confuse him more. He's already connecting with you in a way that's significant. He deserves to understand why." "How do you want to approach it?" Kieran asked, deferring to her parental experience. "Simply, honestly, with age-appropriate details. No vilifying anyone, no complex explanations of corporate manipulation." Nairi's expression was determined. Just the essence of the truth, that his father didn't know he existed because of a misunderstanding, and now that he knows, he wants to be part of Finley's life. "When?" "Today, before you leave." Nairi met his gaze steadily. "If we're going to do this, we need to start as we mean to go on, with honesty and clarity." Kieran nodded, emotion making speech temporarily impossible. When he finally found his voice, it was rough with feeling. "Thank you, Nairi. I know this isn't easy for you." "It's not about what's easy for me," she replied simply. "It's about what's right for Finley." They called Finley back to the living room, where he settled between them on the couch, looking from one serious adult face to the other with growing curiosity. "Am I in trouble?" he asked preemptively. "Not at all," Nairi assured him, smoothing his wild morning hair. "We just have something important to tell you. Something about Mr. Blackwood and why he's here." "Is he going to stay longer?" Finley asked hopefully. "Not at the cabin, buddy, but in our lives, yes." Nairi took a deep breath. "Finley, do you remember how you've asked me about your father sometimes? About why he isn't with us?" Finley nodded, his expression growing more serious. "You said he had important work and wasn't ready to be a dad." "That's what I believed was true," Nairi confirmed carefully. "But I've learned recently that there was a misunderstanding, a big mix-up that meant your father didn't know about you." "Nairi?" Finley's brow furrowed as he processed this. "He didn't know I was born?" "That's right. He was told something that wasn't true, and because of that, he didn't know he had a wonderful little boy." Nairi glanced at Kieran, who sat perfectly still, hardly breathing. "Finley, Mr. Blackwood, is your father." The silence that followed seemed to stretch forever. Finley looked at Kieran with new eyes, searching his face as if seeing it for the first time. "You're my dad?" he asked finally, his voice small but clear. "Yes," Kieran answered, emotion making his voice rough. "I am, and I'm so sorry I haven't been here for you all this time. If I had known about you, nothing could have kept me away." Finley considered this with the serious contemplation he applied to complex scientific concepts. "Is that why you look like me? Mom says I have my dad's eyes." "Yes," Kieran confirmed. "You do have my eyes. And maybe a few other things too." "Like what?" Finley asked, genuinely curious rather than upset. "Well, you're very good at chess for your age. I was too. And you seem to love understanding how things work, asking questions until you really get it. I was always that way." Finley processed this information, then asked the question that had clearly been forming in his analytical mind. "If you didn't know about me because of a mix-up, how come you're here now? Did you find out about the mix-up?" "In a way," Kieran said carefully. "When your mom saved me from the car accident, she recognized me. And I recognized her. And we started talking about what happened a long time ago." "So it was an accident that you found us?" Finley clarified, trying to understand. "Yes," Nairi confirmed. "Sometimes life works in unexpected ways." Finley turned his gaze back to Kieran. Are you going to be my dad now? Like, a real dad who comes to school things and plays chess and helps with projects? The straightforward question, delivered with a child's unfiltered honesty, brought tears to Kieran's eyes that he made no attempt to hide. I would like that very much, he said simply. If you and your mom are okay with it. I've missed so much of your life already, Finley. I don't want to miss any more. Finley looked to his mother, seeking her guidance in this monumental moment. Mom, is it okay if he's my dad now? Nairi swallowed against the tightness in her throat. If that's what you want, then yes. We can figure out how it will work together, all three of us. Finley nodded, his decision apparently made. Okay, but I have questions. Of course you do, Nairi said with a small smile. You always have questions. Where do you live? Finley asked Kieran directly. Is it far away? I live in the city, about 3 hours from here. Kieran answered honestly, but distance doesn't matter. I'll come to see you whenever you want me to, as often as your mom says is okay. Do you have other kids? No, you're my only child. What about a wife? No, Kieran shook his head. I don't have a wife or a girlfriend. Finley considered all this information with the serious expression that made him look far older than his 6 years. Then, with the resilience of childhood, he shifted topics entirely. Can I call you Dad instead of Mr. Blackwood? Mr. Blackwood is really long to say. Kieran's face transformed with such naked joy that Nairi felt her own eyes fill with tears. I would like that very much, Finley. Okay. Finley nodded decisively. Dad. He tested the word, seemed satisfied with how it felt, then continued. Can we finish our chess game now? I was about to do a really good move. The simple acceptance, the lack of drama or trauma in Finley's response, was both a relief and a testament to the secure foundation Nairi had built for him. Children, she reflected, often handled major life changes with far more adaptability than adults, provided they felt safe and loved throughout the process. As Finley retrieved the chessboard, Kieran met Nairi's eyes over their son's head, his expression conveying gratitude more profound than words could express. She nodded slightly in acknowledgement, a silent agreement that they would navigate this new reality together, prioritizing Finley's well-being above all else. The remainder of the day unfolded with a new awareness, a shift in dynamics as they all adjusted to the revealed truth. Finley peppered Kieran with questions about his life, his work, his interests, building a mental image of the father he was just beginning to know. Kieran answered each query with patient honesty, neither overwhelming Finley with too much information nor talking down to him. By mid-afternoon, practical realities could no longer be postponed. Kieran needed to return to his responsibilities, at least temporarily, and arrangements had to be made for future visits. I'll drive you into town, Nairi offered as they discussed logistics. You can rent a car there to get back to the city. And then you'll come back soon? Finley asked, the slightest edge of anxiety creeping into his voice. Very soon, Kieran promised. In fact, I'll need to come back this weekend to collect my things from the wrecked car once the towing company retrieves it. Perhaps we could spend the day together then? Finley looked to Nairi for confirmation. Can he, Mom? Of course, she agreed. We'll plan something special. The drive into town was quiet, Finley having reluctantly stayed behind with their elderly neighbor who often watched him when Nairi had errands to run. The silence between the adults was thoughtful rather than tense, both processing the monumental shifts of the past 48 hours. He took it remarkably well, Kieran observed as they descended the winding mountain road. Better than I dared hope. Finley is resilient, Nairi replied, and he's always wondered about you, even when he didn't ask directly. Finding out you want to be in his life fulfills a wish he's probably had for years. I meant what I said to him, Kieran said quietly. Distance doesn't matter. I'll rearrange my entire life to be present for him. That's a significant commitment from someone with your responsibilities. My responsibilities are changing, he reminded her. I meant what I said about stepping down as CEO. After what I've learned about the manipulation and lies, I can't continue to lead a company that was built on such a foundation. What will you do instead? Nairi asked, genuinely curious. Focus on being a father, first and foremost. Kieran's response was immediate. Beyond that, I have some ideas for new ventures. Smaller scale, ethically driven. The kind of work that allows for work-life balance rather than consuming every waking moment. That's quite a transformation from the man I knew 6 years ago, Nairi observed, keeping her eyes on the road. Nearly losing your life, believing you'd lost your child, and discovering you've been manipulated by those closest to you tends to clarify priorities. Kieran replied with a wry smile that held little humor. I don't expect you to believe this change is permanent based on a few days' observation. I know I'll need to prove it consistently over time. Yes, you will. Nairi's tone was matter-of-fact rather than accusatory. Finley needs stability and reliability. He needs to know that when you say you'll be there, not called away by business emergencies or corporate crises. I understand that completely. Kieran's voice held absolute conviction. And I want you to know that I respect the boundaries you set. This is your territory. You've been Finley's only parent for 6 years. I don't intend to overstep or undermine your authority. I appreciate that, Nairi said sincerely. This is uncharted water for all of us. We'll need to communicate clearly and honestly if we're going to make it work. They reached the small town that served as the gateway to the mountain communities, its main street lined with rustic shops and cafes catering to tourists and outdoor enthusiasts. Nairi pulled up outside the only car rental agency, a modest operation attached to the local service station. I'll wait while you arrange the rental, she offered. Make sure everything goes smoothly. Thank you. Kieran hesitated before exiting the car. Nairi, I know we've focused almost entirely on Finley, as we should. But at some point, we need to talk about us as well. There is no us, Kieran, she replied automatically. There's you and me co-parenting Finley. That's all. Is it? His gaze was steady, unflinching. 6 years is a long time, I know. And I have no right to expect anything beyond your cooperation regarding our son. But what I felt for you wasn't extinguished by time or distance. If anything, it's been clarified by loss. Nairi gripped the steering wheel tighter. I can't have this conversation right now. It's too much, too soon. I understand, Kieran said gently. Just know that whenever you're ready to talk about it, whether that's months from now or never, I'll respect your timeline completely. 1. He exited the car then, leaving Nairi with thoughts and emotions she kept carefully contained for years, now threatening to spill over. The prospect of co-parenting with Kieran was challenging enough. The possibility of revisiting their personal relationship was almost unthinkable. And yet, as she watched him through the rental agency window, she couldn't deny the complicated feelings his reappearance had stirred. Beneath the anger and resentment that had protected her for so long, there remained the memory of what they'd once shared, a connection that had been profound before ambition and manipulation had torn it apart. When Kieran returned to the car to collect his few belongings, his expression was composed but regretful. The rental's all set. I'll be heading back to the city to deal with the fallout from my absence and begin making arrangements for a more flexible schedule. And you'll be back this weekend? Nairi confirmed, thinking of Finley's expectations. Absolutely. Would Saturday morning work? I could be here by 10. That would be fine. I'll make sure Finley is prepared. She hesitated, then added, he'll be looking forward to it. Try not to disappoint him. Try not to disappoint him. I won't, Kieran promised. Nothing short of hospitalization could keep me away. As they said their goodbyes, there was an awkward moment where neither seemed certain of the appropriate gesture. A handshake seemed too formal after the intimacy of their shared past and recent revelations, but anything more felt presumptuous given the complicated nature of their current relationship. Thank you, Kieran said finally, settling for simple gratitude. For saving my life. For raising our son so beautifully. For giving me a chance to be part of his life moving forward. Make the most of it, Nairi replied, neither accepting nor rejecting his thanks. He deserves the best from both of us. Watching Kieran drive away in the rented SUV, Nairi felt a curious mixture of relief and loss. The intensity of the past 2 days had been exhausting, forcing her to confront truths and feelings she'd buried for years. His absence created space to process everything that had happened, yet simultaneously left a noticeable void. When she returned to the cabin, Finley bombarded her with questions about when Dad would return, what they would do together on Saturday, whether he might stay for dinner or maybe even overnight next time. His excitement was both heartwarming and concerning, attaching so quickly to the father he just discovered, carried risks of disappointment if Kieran failed to maintain the connection. One step at a time, buddy, she cautioned gently. Your dad has a lot to figure out with his work and his schedule, but he promised to be here Saturday, and we'll plan something special. Can we show him the waterfall? And the place where we saw bear tracks last summer? And maybe my school? Finley's imagination was already racing ahead, planning all the ways to incorporate his newly found father into their lives. We'll see, Nairi replied, the standard parental hedge that bought time without making promises. For now, how about you tell me how you're feeling about everything? That was big news today. Finley considered the question with his characteristic thoughtfulness. I feel happy that I have a dad now, and curious about him, and a little worried. Worried about what, sweetheart? What if he doesn't like being my dad? What if it's too hard because he missed so much time? The vulnerability in his question revealed depths of understanding beyond his years. Nairi sat beside him on the couch, drawing him close. Your dad already loves being your dad, Finn. I could see it in his face when you called him dad for the first time. As for missing time, that makes him sad, but it also makes him want to be extra present now. Some things are worth waiting for, even if the waiting wasn't by choice. Everyone. Finley nodded, processing this reassurance. Are you okay with him being my dad now? You're not mad? The question caught Nairi off guard. Why would you think I'm mad? Because grown-ups sometimes get mad at each other even when they try to hide it. And you and Dad looked mad sometimes when you were talking without me. Perceptive as always, Nairi thought. It's complicated, buddy. Your dad and I have some grown-up history to work through, but that has nothing to do with how we feel about you. We both want what's best for you, and we're both committed to figuring out how to be good parents together, even though we haven't been together for a long time. This explanation seemed to satisfy Finley, who moved on to planning the menu for Saturday's lunch with his characteristic resilience. Nairi marveled again at children's capacity to adapt to significant changes when provided with honest, age-appropriate information and consistent reassurance. The days leading up to Saturday brought unexpected developments. Kieran called each evening to speak with Finley, their conversations growing longer and more animated as initial awkwardness gave way to genuine connection. He sent a package containing a professional chess set, several books about dinosaurs and space, and a small, sophisticated telescope that Finley immediately declared the best present ever. To Nairi's surprise, Kieran also included a handwritten note for her, separate from the gifts for Finley. I know material things can't begin to compensate for 6 years of absence, he'd written in the elegant script she remembered from their time together. But I hope these small tokens will bring Finley joy and foster his natural curiosity. I've also taken the liberty of setting up a college fund in his name, not to overstep, but to begin addressing the financial responsibilities I should have been meeting all along. Please know that I'm committed to supporting you both in whatever ways you deem appropriate. The note continued with practical details about his schedule reorganization, plans for regular visits, and a request for her input on how best to integrate into Finley's life without disrupting the stability she'd created. It was respectful, thoughtful, and entirely focused on Finley's well-being rather than any personal agenda. Saturday arrived with perfect autumn weather, crisp, clear skies and forests blazing with color. Finley was up at dawn, too excited to sleep, meticulously planning every aspect of the day he would spend with both parents. Kieran arrived precisely at 10 as promised, driving a modest SUV rather than the luxury vehicle he'd crashed days earlier. He brought more gifts, educational toys, books, outdoor gear sized perfectly for a 6-year-old, but more importantly, he brought undivided attention and genuine enthusiasm for everything Finley wanted to show him. They hiked to the waterfall as Finley had requested, the boy chattering continuously about local wildlife, geological formations, and the changing seasons. Kieran listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions that delighted his son, while simultaneously being careful to include Nairi in their conversations, acknowledging her expertise in the natural environment they were exploring. You're a wonderful guide, he told Finley as they reached the waterfall overlook. You know so much about these mountains. Mom taught me everything, Finley said proudly. She knows all the plants and animals and how to stay safe outdoors. Your mom is remarkable, Kieran agreed, meeting Nairi's eyes over their son's head. I've always thought so. The day progressed with a picnic lunch, more hiking, and eventually a return to the cabin, where Finley insisted on setting up his new telescope despite the hours remaining before darkness would make it useful. "We can look at the stars together later," he told Kieran excitedly. "Mom knows all the constellations, and she can show us." "That sounds perfect," Kieran agreed, though they all knew the logistics of a late-night stargazing session on a mountain with a 3-hour drive back to the city afterward were complicated at best. As if reading their thoughts, Finley suggested innocently, "Dad could stay overnight again. Then we'd have lots of time for stars." Nairi and Kieran exchanged glances, neither wanting to disappoint Finley but aware of the boundaries they were still navigating. "I didn't bring anything for an overnight stay," Kieran said gently, "but I promise we'll plan a stargazing night soon. Maybe next weekend, if your mom agrees." The suggestion of continued, regular visits was both reassuring and slightly overwhelming. Nairi found herself contemplating what it would mean to have Kieran become a consistent presence in their lives. The adjustments to routines, the sharing of parental decisions, the inevitable complications of co-parenting with someone who lived 3 hours away. Yet watching Finley flourish under his father's attention, seeing the joy that radiated from him as he shared his world with the parent he just discovered, Nairi couldn't deny the positive impact of Kieran's presence. Despite her lingering reservations and the complicated history between them, it was clear that Finley benefited from having his father in his life. As evening approached and Kieran prepared to leave, Finley's enthusiasm gave way to the beginnings of separation anxiety. "You'll come back next weekend, right?" he confirmed, clinging slightly to Kieran's hand. "You promised about the stars." "Absolutely," Kieran assured him, crouching to eye level despite his still healing injuries. "And I'll call every evening this week, just like I have been. We can talk about your day and make plans for our next visit." "Pinky promise?" Finley held out his small finger solemnly. "Pinky promise." Kieran linked his finger with his son's, the simple childhood ritual carrying profound weight in the moment. "Nothing is more important to me than being your dad, Finley. Nothing." The goodbye was emotional but not traumatic. Finley secure in the promise of continued connection. As Nairi walked Kieran to his car, a comfortable silence fell between them, not the awkward tension of days earlier, but something more settled, more accepting of their new shared reality. "Thank you for today," Kieran said as they reached the vehicle. "For facilitating this time with him. For being so gracious despite everything." "He had a wonderful time," Nairi acknowledged. "You're good with him. Natural." "It's easy to be natural with someone who shares your DNA, your interests, your way of seeing the world," Kieran replied with a small smile. "Though I can't take credit for any of that. Nature provided the blueprint. You shaped him into the amazing person he island. We both contributed to the blueprint." Nairi reminded him. "He has your analytical mind, your methodical approach to problem solving. I see it in the way he breaks down complex ideas into manageable parts. The best of both of us, then." Kieran's expression grew more serious. "Nairi, I want you to know that I've begun proceedings against those responsible for separating us 6 years ago. My father, Harlow, the hospital administrators who participated in the deception, they'll all face consequences for what they did." "Is that necessary?" Nairi asked, surprised by the shift in topic. "It's in the past. Reopening it publicly could affect Finley. Thanks for watching." "I've considered that carefully," Kieran assured her. "The proceedings will be private, discreet, with Finley's well-being the priority throughout. But there must be accountability. What they did wasn't just corporate manipulation or family interference. It was a calculated effort to deny a father knowledge of his child. To potentially deprive a mother of critical medical care during a life-threatening situation. There have to be consequences. And seeing the determination in his expression, Nairi nodded slowly. "Just keep us informed. No surprises that might affect Finley." "Nairi?" "Of course." Kieran hesitated, then added, "There's something else. I've purchased a small property in the town at the base of the mountain. Nothing elaborate, just a comfortable house where I can stay during visits without imposing on you or confusing Finley with hotel arrangements. It would also give him a space of his own when he visits me, if and when you're comfortable with that arrangement." The investment and proximity spoke volumes about Kieran's commitment to being present in Finley's life. It was a gesture that acknowledged both his determination to be involved and his respect for the boundaries Nairi had established. "That's thoughtful," she acknowledged. It would be easier for everyone if you had a local base. I wanted to mention it now, before making any renovations or furnishing decisions. If you and Finley would like input on how the space is organized, especially his room, I'd welcome your involvement. The inclusion in such decisions was another gesture of respect, another acknowledgement of her primary role in Finley's life. Nairi found herself genuinely touched by the consideration. I'm sure Finley would love to help design his space, she said. He has very specific opinions about dinosaur-themed decor. Kieran smiled, the expression transforming his face. I've noticed. I look forward to incorporating those opinions into the plans. As he prepared to leave, Kieran hesitated, clearly wanting to say more but unsure of the reception his words might receive. Nairi, he began finally. I know we're focused on Finley, as we should be, but I want you to know that my feelings for you never changed. Even believing what I was told, even thinking we'd lost our child, I never stopped loving you. It's why I never married, never found anyone else who measured up to what we had. The raw honesty of his declaration hung in the air between them. Nairi's first instinct was to deflect, to maintain the emotional distance that had protected her for so long. But something in his expression, the vulnerability, the willingness to risk rejection, compelled her toward honesty in return. I can't say the same, she replied quietly. I spent years being angry with you, Kieran. Years deliberately pushing away any positive feelings because they hurt too much. I had to focus entirely on Finley, on building a stable life for us. There wasn't room for anything else. Number 4. I understand, he said, though the disappointment was evident in his eyes. And I respect your honesty. But, she continued, surprising herself with the admission, seeing you with Finley, understanding what really happened 6 years ago, it's complicated things. The narrative I constructed to survive isn't the whole truth anymore. I'm still processing what that means. Hope flickered across his features. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere, Nairi. Not this time. The promise held weight, bolstered by the actions he'd already taken to demonstrate his commitment. As he drove away, Nairi found herself contemplating possibilities she hadn't allowed herself to consider in years, not just co-parenting with Kieran, but potentially rebuilding something of the connection they'd once shared. It wouldn't be easy. Trust, once broken, required more than explanations and promises to repair. But watching Finley's joy at discovering his father, witnessing Kieran's genuine commitment to being the parent their son deserved, Nairi found herself willing to consider a future different from the one she'd envisioned. 6 months later, as spring brought new growth to the mountain landscape, much had changed for the small family. Kieran had indeed resigned as CEO of Blackwood Technologies, though he remained on the board to guide the company toward more ethical practices. His local property had become a regular part of Finley's life, with weekends often split between both homes in an arrangement that provided consistency while respecting Nairi's primary custody. Finley had blossomed under the shared attention of both parents, his natural intelligence and curiosity nurtured by their complementary approaches to parenting. School reports noted his increased confidence, his willingness to share his considerable knowledge with classmates, his pride in discussing both his mother's wilderness expertise and his father's technological innovations. As for Nairi and Kieran, their relationship had evolved gradually from cautious co-parents to something approaching friends, then to a tentative exploration of the feelings that had never fully disappeared despite years of separation. Weekend handovers became shared meals. Brief conversations extended into evening discussions after Finley was asleep. Professional respect developed into personal admiration. I never expected this, Nairi admitted one evening, as they sat on the porch of her cabin, watching Finley examine night-blooming flowers with his flashlight in the yard below. When I pulled over to help at that accident site, I thought I was just doing what anyone would do. And instead, you found yourself face to face with the man you'd spent years trying to forget. Kieran finished, his tone gently self-deprecating. The universe has a strange sense of humor. Or timing, Nairi suggested. 6 years ago, I don't think either of us was ready for what we have now. You were consumed by ambition and corporate politics. I was young and idealistic without really understanding what building a life together entailed. And now? Now we've both been shaped by experiences that clarified what truly matters. She turned to face him directly. I won't pretend the past didn't happen, Kieran. The pain was real, the abandonment was real, regardless of the manipulation behind it. But I also won't let that past dictate our future, Finley's future, when we have the chance to build something better. That's all I can ask for, Kieran said softly. The opportunity to prove, day by day, that I'm worthy of the second chance you've given me. Worthy of being Finley's father. Worthy, perhaps someday, of being more than just your co-parent. The openness of his statement, the absence of pressure or expectation, reflected how far they'd come in rebuilding trust. Nairi found herself reaching for his hand in the gathering darkness. A simple gesture that acknowledged possibilities neither of them was rushing to define. Below them, Finley looked up from his botanical exploration, waving excitedly when he spotted his parents watching him. "Mom, Dad, come see what I found. It's exactly like in my science book." They moved together down the porch steps, united in their response to their son's enthusiasm. Their shared love for him the foundation upon which everything else could potentially be built. Life hadn't followed the path either of them had imagined, but the unexpected detours had led them here, to a place where second chances were possible, where truth had ultimately prevailed over manipulation, where a family separated by lies had found its way back together through an accident that proved to be anything but random. As Finley explained his discovery with characteristic detail and enthusiasm, Nairi caught Kieran's gaze over their son's head. The understanding that passed between them needed no words, gratitude for the present, hope for the future, and the shared commitment to ensure that love, not ambition or resentment, would guide their path forward. Some journeys begin with a single step. Theirs had begun with a single choice: to stop for a stranger in need, to help rather than drive past, to choose compassion over justified anger. That choice had altered their lives in ways neither could have predicted, proving that sometimes the most profound healing begins with the simplest act of human kindness. If this story of redemption and second chances resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to Lux Love Chronicles with Mr. Wentworth. Remember that sometimes our greatest blessings arrive, disguised as our worst moments, and the people we think have hurt us the most may be carrying wounds of their own we never suspected. Until next time, keep your hearts open to the unexpected miracles that might be waiting just around the corner.